Okay, hello everyone. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming to this edition of the Coding Dojo Tech Forum. Um, Before I start, I really want to thank Todd Enders and Tim Chen for assisting with the setup. Without their expertise, this talk just wouldn't have happened. And it's really great that they could spend a lot of time really getting this going. So thank you guys. Okay, so where do we start? Data Viz is a huge topic, and I frequently think of the gold rush when I think of data mining and big data and everything out there. The difference is, I guess, really that everything could potentially be valuable when it comes to data. And so it's really important that we need a key, and that's kind of what we're here for. To really learn what the key is and what the real gem, what are we going after when we talk about just data viz and learning about data. So before we get through all that, first I want to show you guys some interesting data viz. And that starts out with something like this. This is the globe of economic complexity. This is developed by a friend of mine out at Harvard, and he worked a long time on this, and it shows a lot of different data points. What's interesting is that you can see things very easily, and you really don't need too much of a story. The story is kind of built in here. You can see all these data parameters coming right onto the globe, and it's just pretty amazing. So you guys can check it out on this screen. Can you guys see it on the screen? Yeah, there you go. So go through here. We can see different vegetable products, foodstuffs. We can move through this pretty quickly, and just visualizing this data. This is tons of data. If we click on different things, we can see the links between different countries. We can also look at some of these stacks. We can look at this data in a different way. And each time I click on one of these, it really just shows us exactly what's there, and we can compare as well as doing our linking as well. So they've built in a couple things to really kind of walk us through this map and show us how to work with data. And just by looking at some of this stuff, we can start to gain insight, which is, I think, what we're really after when it comes to doing data visualization. And we're all kind of data visualizationists all the time. I mean, that's really, I think, part of the key is that we do this data viz in our lives as web developers, as programmers. We're taking data, and we're putting it out on screens. We're putting it in web pages and apps, things like that. So it's important for us to kind of understand a process that we can use to help others see what we want them to see and to really understand the data that we're showing them. Let me show you one other thing before I get too far. All right, here's the periodic table. And this is a pretty amazing periodic table. It looks a little different than the one we built in when you guys did your yellow belt or in web fundamentals. So, and this one we can even look down at the atomic level. I really wish I had a tool like this when I was going through chemistry, because with this I can really see things that just aren't available. And there isn't a lot of obscurity here. This is actually removing obscurity to kind of get into that data, removing things in our way so that we can really relate to this and get down into this stuff. So one more interesting one I'll show you. This one's pretty crazy. It really tells you how you're going to die. So if you're 24 years old, a male, and you're white, at 80, it looks like 28% of 87-year-olds die from cancer, 35 circulatory kind of stuff. So this tells you a story and gives you the narrative right away. This gets you right into this data very, very quickly, which is important because people don't like to sit around and just wait for this kind of stuff. All right, so let's talk about data. Data is really everywhere. With IoT on the horizon, sensors on football players, even in our refrigerators. I just saw something where we could go in our fridge and see what's in our fridge. It'll even scan what's in our fridge and tell us exactly what we need, which is pretty crazy. Now we need just to link that with recipes and we'll be fine. We won't have to do any work when it comes to our refrigerators, at least. So, but the goal of this presentation is to do something a little bit different. It's to how can we successfully approach any data set and provide our audiences with the experience of finding gems. How do we really do that? Why do we do it? So, first of all, why do we need data viz? I mean, we're talking about exabytes of data, tons of data. Every second, there's more data flowing over the internet than was on the entire internet 20 years ago. So it just exploded. When I think about all the gold rush again, we're talking exactly about that. This massive amount of data that we can just get into and jump in and really turn it into something. I mean, we can make money with this data. It's we have to. But we also have to we have to ingest it. We have to understand it. Because Data Viz makes it human. It takes images and it puts it in our minds. It puts us in a position that we can actually consume and ingest that data. And that's luckily for us, we can do that because we need to see that data in ways so we can define our business practices, so we can interact with each other better, we can teach. And our brains really love the fact that we can see these images and collect that data. So let me move back over here. I think I need to switch my screens here. So again, the other thing is for me, especially when it comes to data, I like it because I'm really interested in it because I'm an aha-aholic. I just every time I have an aha moment, I just want another one. It's about insight. It's about really learning things about things that I didn't know about before and doing it quickly. So what are some of the tools? I'm going to show you some tools maybe afterwards. A lot of these things you can get into pretty quickly. So my slide's going to have some information for you that you can kind of look at later. But we're going to talk about things very lightly in terms of the technologies because you guys can already do this stuff. And I'm going to show you mainly some just JavaScript libraries that we're using to visualize data today. So we're talking about D3, Cesium.js, WebGL, which isn't really a JavaScript library. It's a graphics library. There's Tableau. There's ArcGIS. There's also different things like netcdf files and vector files that we use to kind of define this data and ingest it into our computers. And we do that in a number of different ways to make that more or less efficient. So, but it's pretty amazing. And so my last question I really want to talk about is what exactly is data visualization? I mean, it's again all it is representing data in a graphical format, and the purpose is simply to make things simpler, to simplify data values, so that we can get a better understanding of that stuff. So I want to give you some gems first. I want to really kind of give you some stuff that hopefully you'll find pretty interesting right away. And so the first data set I really kind of examined was the data set that I grew up in, my family. So let's look at that. So some of you might know that I was adopted by a Dutch family and I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. I came to the States when I was about a year old, and then I spent the next 35 years of my life trying to figure out what the heck was going on. I had my family, my biological family, and I really didn't know how to fit in. And I had really kind of created some ideas about this data and about, who Koreans were. I didn't really know. I just knew there was a few people. My parents actually adopted 5 children from Korea and 1 child from the United States. And, I really got to see them grow up. And I got to see them grow up in a family that wasn't exactly perfect. It wasn't what someone would say as a successful family. It was really, I came from a failed family. And I'm going to explain that a little bit, but I also want to talk about Korea. In Korea, I really had this other idea that, that my parents abandoned me for some kind of a reason, and I really didn't know what it was. And I saw a lot of data that kind of showed me that pretty stigmatizing things. Like they've got this whole thing like unwed mother here right in their data, and that really kind of, I really wondered about that. So let's see. Let's look at my family data. I'm going to move on with that here. Oh, let's go back to this. So here's my family, and I kind of think of it like a fantasy football team in some ways. So total number of children 14, 3 more. My mom had 6 miscarriages, and so that dropped the number down a bit. And let's see, let me remove this so we can see the slide a little bit better for you. There we go. So yeah, you can see, like, I call it a failed family because the family really didn't do what it was supposed to do. But that was my perspective. That's all I saw. I saw this. I had, like, a couple physically impaired brothers and sisters. I saw religious people in my family. I saw people that got divorced. It was really it was tough. And I didn't really realize this till later on in my life, and I didn't start to compile any of this data until I really started thinking about this kind of a talk. So I really had like a Korean conundrum. I wasn't really sure what was going on with the other children in this country that had been sent out for adoption all around the world. And Korea really has kind of an amazing story when it comes to that. They sent out almost 200,000 children between 1953 and now. So there's a lot of children that got adopted, and I had no idea who they were. I was like completely in the dark. So, let's look at another slide here. I started doing research, and I started getting into more and more data, and I started building little things that I could use to visualize stuff. So, for example, I went on, jumped on CodePen, and I built this using some D3. All right, now this is made with a JavaScript library, but what I could do is really, I kind of tracked between 1965 and 2001 some of the reasons why children were sent away for adoption out of Korea, and I got this data, and this I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense. Poverty. There's the Korean War. After that, the country was rebuilding, and Korea really had to decide how do they deal with all these unplanned pregnancies and all these children that were being born. So they really used this. They used adoption as a way to kind of save the government money for social programs and things like that. And it wasn't until like really after the Olympics that they changed their approach to this. So I did some more building. I just was looking at data. What can I show in my different talks? And I started looking at things where there's tools I could build. So I put together some more stuff. And this didn't really do a whole lot for me other than kind of just, that was fun, and I got to look at my family in different ways. I had something cool I could kind of show around. All right, and like it was just really interesting. Here's a slide of a lot of just showing you where the children went during that range I was talking about. I took this data set, kind of boiled it down, and that's exactly what I used to build some of these visualizations. And I got more into this data, and I started to learn things about it. I even did a WebGL experiment where I took all the children where they were born or where they moved to after they were adopted, and I put them on a globe so I could kind of see them like this in the world. Just this, and I had to end up changing these spikes to logarithmic kind of stacks so that I could really, so I could actually see ones because there's a wide range. Some of them were like, one or two children had gone to some country, and other countries had, dozens or thousands. So it was tough for me to that was one hurdle with Data Viz that I had to overcome. How do I show these data points all in one map that I can see all at once? So as I started looking at more of this Korean data, I started finding out that my story was wrong. I didn't really have a good understanding of how Koreans were making their way in the world. And so I started looking at stuff like this. So look at, in this slide, you've got Koreans that graduate high school and college. All right, pretty amazing. 94% high school graduation rates. That's pretty nutty. Look at, and also, so for foreign-born Asians, still pretty good. 90% of foreign-born Asians graduated from high school. If you think back to my family, I think I've got two brothers and sisters who didn't finish high school when they were going. They both end up getting GEDs at the end of the day, but they didn't finish high school. So what other stories did I have from this? I started looking at just how much money Koreans are making. I kind of thought that Koreans in the world were struggling, and really here they're doing pretty well, which was changing my story slowly and my understanding of what was going on. Here's another, just aptitude tests for Koreans, again, pretty high. So my story was completely wrong. I continued to look at this stuff. I kept on just searching for more data sets. Anything I could get my hands on that talked about Koreans living abroad that had been adopted, that was something I had to uncover. Let's see. So, and today, what do we really end up as? We end up as scientists and engineers and doctors, dentists, and computer specialists. So this got me really interested, and I started even thinking more and more about this, and I did a little more research, and it really came back to this whole point about story being a story being just a bunch of data. And then I flipped it around. What is data anything without a story? And that's really the real gem that I latched onto. Something that I found is that we can take data and use a story to help our viewers navigate through that data. I think that's really the key. whenever they get lost looking at a crazy data set, we give them the story, and that brings them right back. And I think that's one of my most important points of today. And that's really what I learned. Let's keep on going here. I want you guys to tell me what you think this says. We're going to talk about obscurity in data. Jumping to conclusions, right? Everyone can see that. I've got it obscured there, right? So you can't see half of the data there, but you got it right away. Thank you. But let's look at what it really says. Okay? You're totally wrong. But you made a conclusion. You jumped to a conclusion right away. And you said, holy cow, I know what that says. And all that is about adding obscurity. So we add obscurity, take away obscurity. And you can see clearly. And my point to this is that we don't want to hide things. We don't want to take that data and make it narrow down that view too much unless we know exactly why we're doing it. For the most part, I think when we're doing something, we want our data to be ingestible by the most amount of people, the largest audience. I think that's really important for us to do for them, because by adding too much obscurity, we end up just covering up the real truth. All right, so I got to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson a couple years ago at this astronomy convention I was at. A conference. He was speaking, and he's super tall. I got to meet him. He's really a cool guy. And I got to talk to him, and I asked him. I said, Neil, how did you get so good at tweeting? How do you have so many followers? What's the secret? And he told me. He said, well, I like to take something from science. I like to take something really funny, and then I like to mix that with some kind of current event or something that everyone knows about that's going on in the world right now. So I tried to do this with my tweets, a couple of them, and I came up with some kind of weird ones. The first one to my mom was, did you know that hashtag fart molecules actually travel all the way into your brain? I worry about that way more than actual hashtag biological attack, hashtag booty logical terrorism. So clearly that's kind of a failure. So I said, well, okay, I can't tweet, so let me see if I can apply this to some kind of data. And I want to show you some bad data viz. Okay, so look at this. This is the U.S. military strategy in Iraq. Okay, somebody probably got paid a lot of money to do this. All right, and this is terrible. I mean, this is not what I would consider high quality data viz at all. This is kind of something that is just way out there. And so let's look at another one, another crazy data viz. So baby boomers. Let's line them up. And they're not too tech savvy, are they? We can kind of tell right from his midsection area down there. Terrible data viz. Like this is insulting almost, and I don't even know why. But I definitely do not read all this stuff and try to ingest anything. This is like showing me something that could have been maybe like a tree map or something a little bit different. But this clearly isn't something that I consider to be really great work. Okay. I gotta take this out here real quick. I gotta take my picture off of this. All right, here we go. So, look at this data, and you guys kind of tell me. Okay, you can see what it says, right? Daily sea surface temperature, and it's at a specific lat and long. This happens to be in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, now, if you don't know the story behind this just looks like just a plot, time series plot, and we've got a big dip in it, right? It's not too. Who cares, right? But then when we learn that this is about like a hurricane moving through the Gulf, that's one thing I know that can drop water temps. Okay, now look at that big dip right there on the 25th. What do you guys think happened? Hurricane. Okay, well, a hurricane was going through definitely, but how did it drop like 5 degrees in 1 or 2 days and then came right back up again, and then it started to go down again? Doesn't make too much sense. Do hurricanes behave like this? The answer is no. The sensors that were in the Gulf went down that day when the hurricane went through. It took them out. So it took us a few days to get new sensors back out there so that we could collect that data again. And that was like, so, but my point is this. You look at this data and you think, oh, it's a storm. Oh, yeah, I know exactly what that does. But I didn't tell you the right story. And that's what I meant before about saying when you have this data set and people get lost, bring them back to the story. Okay? Tell that narrative in a way that they can understand it. They're going to be able to understand your data and your visualizations much more. All right, let's keep on going. right, so this is the way we look at hurricanes really nowadays, right? And like I even like looking at some real. Whenever I see a storm now, I really tend to look directly at at high resolution sea surface temperature data, because I can see from this kind of data, this right here, if there's storms coming in, then I know if there's a lot of hot water out on the coast, it's going to be a bad one. This is like, if there's a storm coming up, they're saying, oh, we got to watch out, there's a hurricane coming. Straight to some data, look at it, I know the story, so I can decipher what's going to happen pretty quickly. All right, let's look at some more stuff. All right, so here's an example of a map. We all probably know that in California they're experiencing just a huge kind of issues with drought, and this is taken, I think, 2013, 2014, and they took all this data called vegetation anomaly and they overlaid it on a map. This is literally made with like 3 or 4 different data sets smashed together. All right, and you can see these regions up there. You can see the green. And this is actually showing you the opposite. Where it's brown, it should actually be green, and where it's green, it's brown right now. And where it's white, they didn't quite finish this data visualization out. But if I didn't know the story, if I didn't know anything about vegetation anomaly and what this was, okay, I wouldn't really know how to look at it. It doesn't even look that great. Let's look at a better Data Viz. So now I took 2 images, same location, all right, and I just said, okay, let's look at January 18th and January 18th in 2 different years. And look at that. Does this tell the story better? I think so. I think without any forcing, without any data manipulation here, without any obscurities, we can look at this and immediately know what's going on. Look at in 2014, there's not as much snow. Okay, that's what we're missing. Not vegetative anomalies. We're looking at they didn't get enough snow. That's why they've got drought. Okay, so let's pivot here a little bit and talk about, some of my stories, okay? So my story, I was just looking at just my data, and it wasn't a complete picture. And really, it was interesting because it wasn't until Tim Chen really told me about this. That's when I really was like excited about this talk, because that made something very concrete. So it was about looking at my data set, my family, and then comparing that to all the global data that's out there. It's exactly what we should be doing. Before we jump to conclusions, look at a lot of data. Before you set yourself up, look at more data. That's the real key. Looking at, and so finally, how do we create those aha moments in our audiences? We do that by really giving them the data and letting them interpret it. We can't over-interpret. We can't over-obscure things for them. We have to let the narrative do the work. Tell them the right story, and then they can decide exactly what they see in that data. Right. Remember that. That's I think one of the most important things when it comes to really dealing with our data and showing others. And believe me, we got all kinds of data everywhere. It's not just on websites and stored in government data centers and everywhere. There's data everywhere. I mean, I think I was thinking about HP, and each one of their client interactions a few years ago they were generating like 2 gigs of data for each client interaction that they had within their CRM, which is just absolutely incredible. So let's keep on talking about this a little bit more. And I've got a slide here with some steps to really go about creating your own Data Viz. So how do you build a Data Viz app? I think that's specifically what we all want to know how to do. That's our job. That's the business we're in. So first, find your story. Really hone that central idea down. Get that solid. Because if you have that great central idea, that great story, then you have something really solid to work with. Second, just go find that data. There's so much data out there that it's literally just bombarding us everywhere. NASA, for example, where I worked, had 12 data centers. So start with my data center. Start with the Atmospheric Science Data Center at NASA Langley. You can also go to opendata.org, which has got some great data from ArcGIS. ArcGIS just got a great data visualization, Data Viz web app builder, which is pretty intense. Or you can just Google some up. Just go and just look for that data. It's definitely out there. There's a geoplatform.gov, which is an effort to kind of take all the government data sets that are out there and combine them in one spot. I don't know how well they're going to do with that, because there's a lot of government agencies that absolutely just love to kind of hoard that data for themselves. but there's a lot of it out there. I mean, petabytes and petabytes of data. The next, you got to really pick your tools. Are you going to do something browser-based? Are you going to use a tool like Tableau? Are you going to do something that just is something very light? And what I would suggest is to start with something light. Start with something like VizJas that I want to show you right now. So let me get back over to there. And so I've got a couple quick examples. First of all, we can look at some of these things that got put up here. Okay, here we go. I think I actually need to open some of these examples. So this is a fun one. And so I'm just going to show you some examples of VizJas. And they're pretty crazy. They're pretty amazing. For you guys, you can see it on this screen now. It's finally coming up. But yeah, different types of Data Viz using this is all in the browser. This is using something called WebGL. And you can really do some intense things. And I'm going to try to move this a little bit slower so it doesn't completely, kill somebody's computer out there. All right? There's just so many of these cool different things that you can look at. It's really fascinating to find out how you can do this stuff in the browser nowadays. I mean, it's really, really amazing to me. So let me switch up this one. Oops. But yeah, this is a morpher, I think. That's not a very good one. That one's not morphing really. But anyway, with this library of JavaScript here, we can build things, and there's even stuff down here that can start addressing WebVR. So this is really good. So I want to talk about getting into VizJas real quick. So the library is pretty small. I've included it here here on my website, so you guys can, but you can just download this whole library from the VizJas website. And you can see when you're building a VizJas app, you have three things you need to think about. The first thing is your scene. How do you want that background to look? How do you want the things out there to really be placed when you're composing this image? The second thing you really need to figure out is where you're going to put your cameras. Are you going to put your cameras at a certain angle and have it static, and you can move around your background, or are you going to have your camera floating and moving around in time and space? So you need to decide those couple of things. The third thing you need is a renderer. So your renderer is basically just something that's going to express all this code on the screen. You can just see from this little bit of code here that we've got going, there's just a little box that's floating around, and then we can kind of adjust it very quickly. So with camera position, we can zoom in and out. We can get really close. I think this always breaks it, but let's see, let me do and whenever I'm just playing with this stuff, I like to put in large values changes. I don't like to just change the values a little bit. I like to do a lot. So if I do something like, ooh, that's totally not working at all. Let's see. Just get back to our regular image here. And I've completely lost my Data Viz. Why? Okay, here we go. There it is. Okay, and we can also change things that'll make your eyes go ballistic. Changes certain things where this thing's spinning like crazy, and we can make it a lot bigger. Let's make this thing huge. So you can see just by quickly using VizJas, we can build something that really is pretty neat, pretty fast. So we're also going to I'm just going to briefly touch on a couple of these other libraries. So there's Viz.js, which I really like this. There's this timeline tool here that's got some great examples on it. You can kind of see just different things even for event listeners and stuff here on the screen. This is really pretty handy. I built a very large timeline for this to kind of deal with, some 400 data parameters, and so people could sort them and then get to some Data Viz. And maybe I'll try to show that. Do a little on-the-fly stuff here. Maybe that's not such a great idea, but doing it. We're living on the edge here. So this is one of the websites I built. And let's see here, let's go to data ranges. And this is using that timeline software. Excuse me, that that JavaScript. So you can see right here, I can bring up all these data parameters like air quality, and then I can go to them and visualize them right away in this tool. And this is a pretty cool tool. It's got, like I said, over 400 data parameters. We can do things like zoom in to locations and look at things very closely. And as long as we know the story, like this is air quality. Now, air quality is kind of a tough one to understand. I think all of us have an idea of what it is, but let's look at something that makes it a little more real. Let's zoom out here. So this isn't a good one. Let's find a little better one that tells us a little bit more to match my story here a little bit better. I'm actually looking for something called aerosols optical depth. Okay, here we go. It's optical depth. So let's look at that. Let's look at the Miser satellite's optical depth, because this is always fascinating to me. Like, look at this. So look at right over the Atlantic there, we've got just a lot of redness. We've got a lot of red stuff, and that's actually showing more particles in the air. So if you look at this Data Viz, you can see right here in the middle of the screen this big red spot. Now, what do you think that red spot might be? And I'm just waiting for it to update. What do you guys think this red spot is right in the middle of the frame?
Dust from the Sahara.
Exactly, dust from the Sahara. Nice, you nailed it. There's also some other stuff going on there. People there also do a lot of cooking, a lot of outdoor cooking. So this can also be from a lot of fires burning all the